Gatekeeper, open the portals between the gods and mortals. Power freely flows as our magic grows.
As you come, night, with stars in your train, the crickets begin your song. The frogs join in, and the owls too, and I with a human voice. Praise your overpowering presence, all one chorus to your honor. Hi, I'm Aaron, and you're listening to Part the Mist, a podcast by a couple of druids here in Portland, Oregon. Thank you so much for tuning in again, whether you've been listening to us for the past year and some change, or this is your very first episode. We appreciate all of our listeners, and we're excited to keep putting out new shows for you. Our invocation this month is another prayer by David Fickett-Wilbar, more commonly known as Ceisiwr Serith. I want to switch things up a little bit, and I chose his prayer for the night, since I'm recording at sunset right now. That also means that I don't have a whole lot else to tell you here, since I'm pretty sure you're pretty well experienced with the night. We're continuing with our interview series this month, and we actually have Michael Dangler back on the podcast to talk about his experience with this year's Wellspring ADF Camping Festival. Wellspring is hosted at Tradara Hearth in Ohio, and it's also the summer home of the Stone Creek Grove ADF. This event has been home to ADF's annual meetings for several years running now, so in addition to talking about Wellspring itself, we're also going to be talking about the annual meeting, what goes on there, and the reports and stuff that happen at the annual meeting. We also talk about some of the competitions that happen every year at Wellspring, and the advantages of attending an ADF camping festival, and the particular advantages of this location. We talk a bit about how you can actually see some of the pictures, some of the 360 photos that have been taken, and I'm going to make sure to include the link down in the show notes. But Michael Dangler does have some pictures up on the Three Cranes Grove website, or Facebook group, if you want to go check those out. We also talk about the, quote, spirit of ADF, unquote, which was a concept that was kind of conceived at Wellspring last year, and it's really kind of an interesting concept. So you'll get to hear a little bit about what that's actually about and how it was born. And we wrap things up talking about what it's like being a leader in ADF and being a parent, and what it means to create family-friendly environment within ADF, and some of the steps that are being taken towards that, particularly within Three Cranes Grove itself, and as well as Columbia Grove. After the interview and our musical interlude, we'll hear once more from Kirk Thomas, reading from the archives, The Ghosti of Our Own Druidry. So, I hope you enjoy our episode, dear listeners, and there's nothing more but to go ahead and let you get to it. So, hi again, listeners. I am here today with Michael Dangler. He was with us a couple podcasts ago talking about the Dedicant Path. And we've invited him back today to talk a little bit about Wellspring, which just happened a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, about 2 weeks ago.
And Wellspring is another ADF ritual that happens over on the far lands of the East Coast.
The Wellspring's located at Tradara, which is in northeastern Ohio near Cleveland, about, 30 minutes eastish, northish of Cleveland. So the land is owned by Ian Corrigan and Leofol. So it's ADF member owned, which is nice. In years past, it had been at Brushwood, which was not. It was a pagan-owned campground, but it's nice to have it as an ADF space.
Absolutely. And Ian Corrigan, for our listeners, we've probably talked about him a little bit. He's one of the ADF elders, I guess you would say. He's been with ADF just about as long as ADF has been an organization. And briefly Archdruid, and has contributed quite a lot to the growth of ADF.
Absolutely. He was our second Archdruid after Isaac, I believe. He was Vice Archdruid when Isaac retired. And I know that he's a senior priest, and he has a blog presence at Into the Mound is the name of the blog. So, and Sue, his wife, also does a lot of wonderful work for ADF. I believe she's a former Vice Archdruid. I may be misspeaking there, but I think she might be. So.
Yeah, we've talked about having them out, hopefully at Beyond the Gates at some point.
They would be good for that.
But we're not here to talk about Beyond the Gates today. So tell us a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about what Wellspring is about.
Sure. Every year, ADF has an election for where our annual meeting is going to be, and for many years, Wellspring is the festival that has won that contest. It's come close a couple of times to not winning it, but every year that I've been a member, at least for now 15 years, 20 years almost, it has won and has been the site of the annual meeting. So it's a very organizational-centric festival in many ways. The Mother Grove gets installed typically at that festival, and we talk a lot about the guilds and the SIGs and the kins, and there's usually, though there was not this year, there's usually a meeting of the Council of Senior Druids, and so there's a lot of organizational stuff that happens around it. There's also a lot of magical stuff that happens around it. We do Archdruidic installations, typically at Wellspring. We have also typically, though not always, done senior priest elevations. My own was at Summerland, but that's a common place for those because it's the festival that everyone tries to get to if they're only going to make one festival typically, because it is the annual meeting. Then we also, I think back in 2009, initiated the ADF Initiatory Current, and so that was born out of Wellspring as well. And then last year we built an ancestor mound at Tradara. We had the passing of several people that were particularly important to Stone Creek, but also to ADF, AJ Gooch being one of them. And so last year we built a mound for the ancestors to sort of reside in on the land. And every year we're adding to the space and making it more both habitable for us and for the spirits, I like to think. So the space of Tradara is growing and changing as well as we go out there. So there's a lot of stuff that happens at Wellspring. Some of it's a lot of fun. You get a lot of good workshops. You get a lot of good, well-skilled people in ritual doing stuff. And some of it's kind of, frankly, boring if you choose to just go to the organizational stuff. You can sit around and talk policy if you want, which some people might find exciting.
It might depend on how you define boring. I mean,
it really does. But most people don't go to their church's main retreat just to sit and listen to policy logs talk on and on and on, though we're also happy to do that, should that really be what you want to do. So yeah, we try and have a lot of fun on both sides of it, but there's usually a lot of good ritual, a lot of good workshops, as well as the ability to meet and be social with other ADF members.
Mm-hmm. Son of a... forgot what I was about to ask.
One of the other things that we do is we have an annual meeting. So I mentioned this is the site of the annual meeting that we vote on each year. And we switched formats this year. It used to be a bunch of people would stand up there and they would read their reports, but this year it was far more interactive, a lot of more question and answer going on, which was very nice. As I understand, that was Drum's idea, which is great. Our Arch Druid, he decided that he wanted to have more dialogue, which is totally cool. And so there was a lot of discussion. We talked, for instance, about starting up a new option for training and kind of doing the work of our Druidry, which is the idea of Hearth Keepers, which doesn't necessarily require the Dedekind path work. It's still kind of fuzzy, but it could potentially be a kind of a family unit sort of work instead of a grove-centric sort of work. So there's a lot of options kind of floating around about that, and we had a lot of discussion about that at the annual meeting as well. So a lot of interesting ideas get thrown about in that may or may not have already shown up on lists, but it's fun to see what people are thinking about and the kinds of questions they have. So.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anything on the list that I follow about the Hearth Keepers, you said?
Yeah. I think it's a pretty new idea that Ian has come up with. It's not terribly new. He mentioned it about a year ago, and we didn't move very far on it, but it's something that has sort of been circling in his brain for a little while. So
fast as a speeding oak.
Yep, you may see something about it soon. You may see something about it next Wellspring. We'll find out.
Oh, sounds exciting. So, one of the things that I did notice was Crystal sent out the reports that I guess is usually what everybody reads at this annual meeting.
Yep.
And that it's definitely a lot of policy and stuff, as you were mentioning, but I found it actually to be a really fascinating read, just to kind of catch up on what's going on with the Mother Grove.
It is, and it's not only, the Mother Grove in many cases, it's also individuals who are in volunteer positions, so you'll find all the regional reports and things like that also get wrapped up in it, which is really nice, because then you can start to see kind of what's going on more organically within the regions, too.
Right. Now, I also saw some very awesome panoramic pictures, and what's the term that they're using for the 3D pictures you were taking?
So those are spherical photos. It occurred to me at some point that we had some nifty technology we could play with, and so we went out to. I went out with my camera and we started taking spherical photos, which if you find them on Facebook, and you can find them in if you go to the Three Cranes Grove ADF Facebook page, in our albums, there's a festival album. And what I did is I uploaded them there. And on Facebook, if you go into these photos, you can get kind of a 360-degree view, including the sky and the ground, of the Ancestor Mound and the Nematon at Tradara. And I might have taken one more, but I'm not sure if I did. Oh, the old Nematon as well. And there's a lot of people who can't make it to these festivals, and I really wanted some way for people to be able to see kind of the space that we were in, especially since the work that we do in many cases is tied to the land, and we're very spread out. But this tie that we have to the land, if you can see the land that other people are on, it might help people get a better connection to the space and the work that we're doing. So I wanted to make sure that at least that was available to us. I don't know if I ever posted it. I took a picture of the fire as well and the space out there. I might post that later. But that was... I wanted to give people a feel for what the space looked like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as someone who was obviously unable to make it myself, I loved that was something that you provided. I felt like it captured the spirit of ADF, to be sure. And you also did a 360 of the annual meeting, which was kind of neat. It kind of helped me feel like I was sitting there behind the magical druid table watching the annual meeting.
That's right, I did do that. Was a panoramic photo, so that you could kind of get a view of the Mother Grove sitting up front and taking the questions, and then people standing further back. And I know that picture got a little washed out because it went from dark under the pavilion to really light because it was very bright that morning. I took a panoramic picture of the Artisans Guild display, the contest the artisan had, so that you can see all of the items that were up for competition, and that's on the Artisans Guild Facebook page.
So let's talk about that a little bit. It seems like there's quite a few competitions that happen at Wellspring.
There are. So there's the aforementioned Artisans competition, which anyone can enter. I don't believe you have to be a member of any of the guilds to do any of these competitions, but it may help to have the skills.
Mm-hmm.
But the Artisans award in a variety of categories. They also do a best in show typically. But no matter what your art is, they have a category it'll sort of fit in, whether it's textiles and knitting, or whether it's paints or photography. They've got some way to compete and find out if your skills match up with anybody else's, and maybe take home a nifty prize if yours is the best. There's also a Bardic chair competition, and I think they've done this for about 5 or 6 years now. But it's a 3-pronged competition of song, story, and poetry, I think. And the person who does the best, who scores the highest in all 3 of those categories, becomes the Wellspring Bardic Chair, which comes with plenty of bragging rights, which excites every bard I've ever met.
I wouldn't know what that's like.
Yeah. And then... and the competition is always excellent. There's always someone who does an astounding job that is unexpected, and it's beautiful to watch people who you may not get to see in ritual or get to talk to necessarily, but when they get up onto stage, they have a great presence. And at that point, someone says, "Hey, that person needs to be going out and doing ritual, and we want them in the main rite," or whatever it might be, singing a song or telling a poem. It's a great way to get noticed. There's also usually warrior games where feats of skill and strength and speed are done. And one of the main attractions there is often a foot race or archery or stone throw. But the foot race seems to get the most people cheering and laughing and having a good time. And then occasionally you'll also find a brewing competition. And there's never a shortage of judges for that.
I was going to say, a brewing competition, that doesn't sound very ADF at all, no.
No, not a bit.
Well, I'm curious how the warrior games end up going over. It seems like it seems to rain a lot during Wellspring. At least it did this year, from what I've heard.
It is called Wellspring, and it was perhaps inauspiciously named, but it was actually not that bad weather-wise. For the most part, the weather was fairly dry. We had a terrible thunderstorm rip through on Sunday afternoon, but it rained for 20 minutes, and that was about it there. And we had rain on, I think, Thursday, and then sun on Friday and Saturday. Rain in the afternoon on Sunday, and but I packed a dry tent up on Monday morning because it was sunny and dry.
All right.
So it's it's one of those things where you've got 4 days right off the coast of Lake Erie. One of them is going to be wet, probably 2, and you can just hope that it's not the last day when you're packing up.
Yeah. It does actually sound a little bit like how our Beyond the Gates event happened last year. It would rain in the mornings or the evenings, and then just be dry the rest of the day.
Yeah, I mean, you will hear a lot about weather at festivals. So I was at Trillium this year. I've been to Wellspring. I've been to Summerland. They all have the occasional spat of bad weather, and you can't avoid it. You can't plan for it. You can just hope for the best.
Make some offerings to Tyrannus.
Exactly. Don't let bad weather deter you, though, from going to a festival. It's so much more worth it than just the weather. It really is.
And last time we talked, you mentioned that you were actually vending at this festival. I'm kind of curious about how the vending process goes.
Every festival's a little bit different. Some of them have a vending fee, and some of them don't. Some of them require a donation to an auction, and some of them don't. Most festivals have an auction or a raffle of some kind to raise additional money and keep the festival solvent and the price at the gate down. But the interesting thing about vending is that I get to kind of sit in one place and I get to meet everybody who comes through, which is pretty cool. And everyone knows where to find me. I don't have to get up and go find people, which really works out well for my introvert self. It's better for me to just sit behind a table and wait for people if they absolutely have to talk to me. But it went fairly well. Wellspring is a pretty good festival for vending, and so is Trillium. Those are probably the two best ADF festivals. So if you go to either of those, I would recommend that, because they have a good spread of vendors, bring some cash and go shopping. There will be people to buy from, not just me, but several people to buy from. And you can get some cool stuff. I know Trillium has a vendor with stained glass that often comes, which is pretty cool. And here at Wellspring, we had a vendor with cigar boxes that were hand burned with nifty ADF-centric sigils. He was also at Trillium as well. So there's a wide variety of things usually to purchase. The one thing that has been missing this year, the ADF store has not been traveling. But as I understand it, it is now open online, and you can now go to, I think it's store.adf.org, and view the items that they have there too. So
check it out. Go donate go buy awesome things from the ADF store.
Yeah.
Now, something that I remember kind of being a big deal last year, I think it came out of Wellspring, I could be wrong, was the Spirit of ADF. Yeah.
It did come out of Wellspring. So the story behind that, there's two kind of stories behind it. But the one that I spend a lot of time on, a couple of us got together and we were wandering through Tridara last year in the dark, and we decided that we would sit down at the fire in the Nematon, and we would do a quick ritual, and then we would make offerings to the Spirit of ADF. And so we sat down and we did a full quarter of ritual. It was, I think, myself, Reverend Melissa Hill, Reverend Jana Vende, Reverend Kathleen Pezza, and Reverend Sarah Blackwelder. We all sat down, and then out of the darkness, Reverend Nancy McAndrew came out of the dark and followed some lights and sat down at the fire next to us and joined us just randomly. And we were doing this ritual specifically to all the good things in ADF that we really love, because ADF has its egregore and its spirit. We felt, and so we wanted to talk about all the good things that we encounter in ADF, and so we made praise offerings of the things that we like best about ADF. The only rule that we had there was no speaking negatively about ADF. This is all about focusing on the positives. And so the work that we did that night was deeply inspiring to a number of us. It feels good to talk about the positive sides of ADF and the things that really excite us. There's another piece that sometimes gets intermixed with that, which is Reverend Melissa Hill, who was there at that as well. We do regular clergy work, which involves trance work and journeying work and stuff like that as ADF priests. And in the course of doing that, she encountered a spirit that she felt was the spirit of ADF. And she did some work with that spirit that involved some unbinding and some working. And that piece is a little bit different because it's not really the public facing piece or really even the same thing that we were doing. Mm-hmm. I'm not even sure if they are the same spirit, but it's been an interesting experience working with the spirit of ADF that we started with at Wellspring, and then understanding the spirit of ADF that she's been working with and how they correspond and turn. So there's been a lot of work around kind of both those things, but particularly when I focus on it, I'm focusing on the things that I love about ADF and the spirit that animates us all together. So. Mm-hmm.
So for me, this podcast is one of the one of my personal positive aspects of the spirit of ADF.
It is indeed an excellent manifestation of that spirit.
Thank you. I love that idea of honoring the positive, because sometimes, especially when you're clergy or when you're more on the political side of things, it can get very easy to get wrapped up in the negative. And I think it's an absolutely beautiful idea to just stop and remember the positive, remember everything that kind of brought us to ADF and the things that we love about ADF, and to honor and worship that.
I agree. And at the end of the day, when we think about ADF, I hope that we think about it positively and that we think about it with joy, because it is that experience. That's what drew us to it in the first place, and that is the experience that we want to ensure lives in our hearts and that we are able to show to others. And I think that's the key work of the Spirit of ADF work, is being in that center, being focused on the joy and spreading that joy to others. That's really what the kicker is with me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's hard to find a good transition from that, but
that's it.
So I'm gonna kind of transition out of let me ask first. Actually, is there anything more anything else about Wellspring that you'd like to comment on?
I think the only thing that's useful to comment on is that, no matter what might go on in ADF, whether you're concerned about, politics like you were just talking about, whether, you're solitary and you're not sure about this whole, this place where a whole bunch of groves are going to show up sort of thing. Festivals in general and Wellspring in particular is worth it and welcoming, I tend to think. It's a big space, and there are always people there who are willing to welcome you and sit down and talk to you as long as you want. There's no need to be concerned about those kind of things. You can introvert all you want. You can hang out in the Nematon alone as long as you want. You can go lie down on the mound and take a nap, which I would not necessarily recommend, but it's an option. You can hang out in the old Nematon, which I saw a whole lot of people doing, which was really cool. Or you can show up and we had someone who camped next to us that we hadn't ever met before. She came down from Chicago, I think the second day, and left on Sunday, so she was only there for a couple of days in the middle, but it was really nice to get to know her, and it was a lovely thing to get to meet people, and I love meeting people at festivals. I mentioned I'm an introvert. I like to sit in the shop, but I still really like meeting people anyway. It's terrible at starting a conversation. The shop gives me a really easy way to do that. I can ask what people are interested in, But yeah, it is worth doing. Totally worth going to one of those things. If you're not out here near the East Coast or the Eastern Midwest, definitely go to Beyond the Gates and Eight Winds and the ones that are out west. Definitely take a look at them. So.
Yeah, I'm attending Eight Winds for the first time this coming year, and I'm excited for the opportunity to get to meet some faces of ADF that I don't necessarily get to see the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And Wellspring is ADF only?
It's not ADF only. There's a couple of people who are local who will show up, but it typically draws mostly ADF members. And that's true of most ADF festivals. Mm-hmm. They mostly draw ADF members. So the space is typically pretty safe. The people are good, and that helps a lot. Makes
sense. Well, so keep an ear out for Wellspring next year. Usually happens around the end of, what month did we just finish? May.
It's Memorial Day weekend, and I believe it will probably always be Memorial Day weekend. So if you wanted to make plans, it starts on the Thursday before Memorial Day and ends on that Monday. And if you needed to fly in or out earlier or later, or you wanted to travel and get in earlier or later, I am pretty sure that if you contact Stone Creed Grove, they would tell you what they needed to make those arrangements with. So,
sounds great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us about Wellspring.
No problem.
I'd like to divert the conversation a little bit. Since we last spoken, I've become Facebook friends with you, and I've gotten to see some. Boy, Aaron, your grammar. Oh, let me try that again. I've been able to see some, I have to say, adorable posts. It sounds like you've got some really great kids. And I know you actually mentioned during one of our recent elections being a parent and being involved with ADF, particularly on the administrative side. So, if you wouldn't mind, would you expand a little bit on that for the podcast?
Sure. So, I assume that you're referring to the Council of Senior Druids election and the email that we have for that. Yeah.
And let me clarify. Sorry, let me clarify for our listeners too, in case you are not a member of ADF. Right now, that we are kind of starting to attract more and more people who are younger and who have families, and we're still kind of learning. We're still kind of moving towards developing more family-centric kind of stuff.
Yeah, and part of it is that some of the individuals that we attracted, 10, 15 years ago, like myself, are at we're at a point now where we are having families. We're building communities. We're bringing our spouses into ADF. We are having children who are then growing up with an ADF view. And this had been happening for a little while, but it wasn't terribly common. But it's becoming more and more common now. I mean, in our grove alone, Three Cranes, we have, I don't even know how many kids we have right now, but I think it's somewhere on the order of, we might have 10 kids who are 3 and under, 4 and under, somewhere in that range. And it affects the way that we do ritual, and it changes the dynamics within the grove, and it makes things fascinating in terms of, okay, so how do we do a ritual that's possibly going to last an hour or more or a little bit less, but possibly around an hour, and how do we manage kids who don't have an attention span like that, or infants who need to be with their mother or father, but with infants, what happens when someone needs to breastfeed in the middle of a ritual? Right. The answer to that, by the way, is we're cool with it, whatever. But it causes you to ask a lot of questions that you may never have asked before. And it's been fascinating trying to figure out how to do that. We live broadcasted a couple of rituals last year. I think we did Samhain and Yule, and maybe we did one more. But for Yule in particular, both Reverend Janavende and I went to this ritual with our toddlers and no spousal support. And so between the two of us, we had 3 kids at 3 years old running around trying to do this, and I'm working cameras and helping to run the ride as best I can, and it was entertaining to say the least. But what we ended up doing, and you can watch this on the video that we posted to Facebook and the video that we posted to YouTube, which are slightly different. The videos we post to YouTube are not live, so they've got several camera shots in them, which is helpful. And the videos that we post on Facebook tend to be live and single camera shots. But what we end up doing is we do a gate opening where we just said, hey, we got all these kids, we have to entertain them, they're going to open the gates with us. And so we brought them into the center for this kind of central magical ritual or magical piece that we do, and we had them working with us in that process. And there are people that I know have looked down their noses at that particular fact, but at the end of the day, it got done. It got done well. It had more energy than a lot of the gate openings that I've seen at really highly skilled festivals, and I was actually very happy with the way that it came out. And so learning how to do that sort of thing and making it so that the kids feel welcome, I think, is very important. Because if we tell them to sit down and shut up, if we tell them to go sit somewhere else, if we tell them that, this ritual is not for you, then they're going to grow up feeling like it's not for them. And that's not something that I'm willing to have my religion tell them. And so we're going to find whatever way we can to include them in everything that we do as we go forward. So, and in some ways that's going to start, there's always been some kind of kids programming and things like that. It often falls to the parents to provide that. There's not a lot of people who are willing to provide that if they don't have kids or if they haven't had kids, and that's fine. But it can make it difficult for us to find safe spaces for kids if we're not careful and supporting that as well. So we're trying to make sure as we go that we're building those structures in place so that we've got safe spaces for kids where no one's going to, sit around a fire and extol the virtues of pot, for example, to our minor children, which is fine. Hold those opinions. That's cool. Don't tell the minors about how cool pot is. And explaining things like at a festival, people sit around, they drink. Mm-hmm. They, become more liberated from their clothes. And that's cool and all, but we need to make sure as well that when we're in those spaces that we're aware that there are kids around as well, and that not everyone who is a parent maintains our personal social mores and values as we do that work. So it's a long-term process. It's a learning experience for everybody involved, not just the people who don't have kids, but also the parents who have them and the kids. And trying to manage that is an interesting aspect of our druidry, I have found. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's we like to boast in Columbia Grove about having a family-friendly space, family-friendly rituals. One of a couple of our core members who end up leading a lot of the rituals or doing a lot of the rituals have an is he 8 or 9 now? He just had a birthday. Their kid Xander. He's like I said, he's about 8 or 9, so he's old enough to sit still for most of the ritual, but it's still been kind of an interesting experience having him around and learning and growing with, how do we keep these rituals in these spaces one that's comfortable for him. And of course he's not the only kid that ends up showing up. We have a lot of kids his age that end up coming around, and I personally, I would like to see more materials put out by ADF and more more things done by ADF talking about handling kids and handling families.
I think that we all would, and it is well and good for us to, as parents, to be the ones who are responsible for producing those, because we do have the largest amount of interest in that. But on the other hand, the key thing that we need as parents is a recognition that our children are people too, and that designing ritual that is accessible to them is part of creating quality public ritual. It doesn't have to be dumbed down for kids. It just has to be interesting. It has to be something that, if they choose to participate, we should encourage it, not discourage it. Mm-hmm. And that is a difficult thing to understand, to figure out how to do it. But I think that it's something that is certainly worth doing the work for. We're big on accessibility. Not just our Grove, but ADF as a whole. We like to say that we're big about accessibility in public ritual. Part of that is making sure that the audience that wants to be there is able to be there. So that means, for our Grove, that meant moving our rituals earlier. Almost all of our rituals now occur at 2:30 or 3:30 in the afternoon, which is a huge shift because they used to occur at 6 o'clock at night. But that started overlapping with bedtimes. People couldn't come. We said, all right, well, we'll just move it earlier. And that's worked out reasonably well. I'm actually kind of surprised at how well it worked out. We try and get the kids involved. When we did a processional for last year's Beltane, we gave all the kids musical instruments and created...
Just a minute, Michael. It sounds like I'm getting some feedback. Are you playing with something or anything?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I'm just getting some interesting feedback, so I just wanted to make sure. So go ahead.
But yeah, so last year at Beltane, we gave all the kids musical instruments. We sent them out and had them walk around with these instruments, shaking bells and rattles and beating on drums and stuff like that, and kind of got them involved in the idea of calling spirits to the space. And they really enjoyed that, and it helped them feel included. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be, that you're doing everything that, kid-friendly and kid-accessible, but making sure that they have the ability to take something memorable away from it is a good first step. So,
I actually really like that idea, and I think I might be stealing that for Beltane next year.
Steal away. We gave them fairy wings, too. It was great.
Oh, that's awesome. We made, Spider made little fairy crowns.
Yeah, that's great. If you want to watch it, our YouTube page, you can kind of see it. We actually took we had a stereo microphone set up, so if you listen to it with headphones on, you can hear the procession move across the soundscape. It's pretty cool.
Oh, nice.
So.
Well, I think that might be all I have. That might be all the thoughts that I have for today. Do you have anything else that you'd like to say for today?
No, I think that I'm good.
What's the YouTube channel?
It is youtube.com/3CG videos.
3CG videos?
Yep. As in Three Cranes Grove, and it's the number 3 CG videos. And we have approximately 80 videos of ritual and various other things up there. So if you're looking to, if you're solitary and you want to see how a grove does ritual, you can watch how we do ritual. We've got full rituals up. We've got shorter rituals up. We've got a couple of devotionals. We're always adding stuff to it. I think I'm about 2 rituals behind in uploading ritual stuff. We've also got a series that we're kind of in the middle of, and the death of my father interrupted some of the video editing, so we've only got 3 of the videos up so far. But we're calling it Quarter Ritual Variations, and it shows different types of or different things that we have done for the same part in ritual. So there's one for initiating the rite, one for the Earth Mother prayer, one for inspiration, and we're going to go through most of the quarter ritual, pulling those things out. So we got plans for video,
awesome.
And I think we have more video than anywhere else of ADF ritual and ADF centric stuff, including the ADF pages. Or the ADF YouTube page. So,
well, you're a pretty tech savvy guy, as I understand it.
I have learned by experience. So if you look at our old stuff, it's not anywhere near as good as our new stuff, and that's the key thing. One of the things that I am working on though is I want more groves to record. I really do, because we have a lot of variation in practice, and no one's doing it the one right way. We certainly aren't. I can tell you that right off the top of my head. But I'm putting together I guess kind of a primer on how to record ritual and that sort of stuff. So I'll have that hopefully soon. I'm putting it together primarily for clergy to start with, and then once I've gotten it out to them, I will probably either make a workshop out of it or present it more broadly. So.
Oh, that's awesome! I think that would be a major contribution to ADF.
It's the hope. I mean, Isaac's vision was very clear that he wanted really broadly accessible ritual.
Yeah.
It says right in there that he was hoping for globally televised rituals from Stonehenge. Well, that's not where the technology has taken us, but we have done the equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
So we're there. And if you're really interested, like the Three Cranes Grove ADF Facebook page, because our Lunacerite will be, if we get all the technology working, we're going to live stream that, and we're doing that at the Dublin Irish Festival, where there are about 300 people who attend.
Oh wow!
So it's going to be an experience. I'm not quite sure how well it's going to go, but we're going to find out. So, and that's on. Hang on, I can actually even tell you the date and time on that. That will be on August 6th at 10 a.m. is when we will be doing 10 a.m. Eastern, so it'll be very early for the West Coast folks. But that's the time slot they gave us at the Dublin Irish Festival. So,
well, that sounds awesome, and it'll be a learning experience at the very least.
Yes, it will. We've tried to do some live streaming, and it's come off well and not so well. It just kind of depends.
Well, thank you so much, and Three Cranes Grove Facebook page is where you can see the other live streamed videos.
Yep, you can see those there, and you can also see videos on our YouTube page. There's a lot more on our YouTube page than there is on our Facebook page, but that may change over time.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast again, Michael. It's always a pleasure.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure for me as well.
Well, thank you. And I look forward to next time.
Excellent.
Some thought that all their hating had sent her beneath the waves. Avalon was merely waiting, for her folk will not be slaves. Now the day of freedom's dawning brings them back forevermore. Avalon is rising, is rising, is rising. Avalon is rising to fall no more. Avalon is rising, is rising, is rising. Avalon is rising to fall no more. Hark all ye in groves and bowers, Pan has come another time, ruling with a rod of flowers, giving us the bliss sublime. Prayer and Freya now shall guide us, Venus be our counselor. Avalon is rising, is rising, is rising. Avalon is rising to fall no more. Avalon is rising, is rising, is rising. Avalon is rising to fall no more.
Listen, warriors of the old gods, as the wild hunt's horn doth sound. All their works shall fall before us, and the
fall no more. Avalon is rising, is rising, is rising. Avalon is rising to fall no more.
Hi, I'm David, and you're listening to Part the Mist, a Druid podcast created and hosted by members of Columbia ADF.
Hello, I'm the Reverend Kirk Thomas, and this is From the Archives. Now today's article is from Oak Leaves issue number 73, summer of 2016, and it's entitled The Ghosti of Our Own Druidry by the Reverend Jan Avende. Reciprocity is an essential component to walking the path of our own druidry. This is familiar to many of us in the context of ritual. We give gifts to the spirits that we may build a relationship with them and receive their gifts in return. Now, this relationship of reciprocity is also important in how we interact with each other and with our community as a whole. A healthy community is supported by the gifts of its folk so that it may then support each of those individuals. There are many ways to engage in this Ghosti relationship, many ways to give and many ways to receive. We can give the gift of prayer. We can give the gift of inspiration. We can give the gift of community. We can give the gift of wealth. We can give the gift of service. And the more we strive to share these gifts, the stronger our community will grow and the more fulfilled we will be in our own druidry. The gift of prayer, Urtha. We maintain right action and right relationship with the gods and spirits. It is important work to ensure that the proper sacrifices are made at the proper times. We write liturgy and lead rituals. We know the cycles and seasons, and we keep the high days. We pray on behalf of those who need it and request it. And when we commune with the kindreds and engage in a Ghosti relationship with them, we are giving the gift of prayer and upholding the work and vision of Anriot Féin. The gift of inspiration. Lead others to the flame. We give workshops and create teaching materials. We do community outreach and explain our beliefs to the curious. We welcome those seekers of the old ways into our path. When we ignite the flame within others, that they may walk the path of our own druidry, we are giving the gift of inspiration and brightening the work and vision of Anriot Féin. The gift of community. One fire, one hearth. Our community with each other is what makes us strong. We embody the spirit of hospitality. We can give the gift of community by being present and thoughtful in our online pagan communities, by attending and participating in our local pagan communities, and by being a listening ear and sounding board to others in our community. When we are consistently present in the lives of those practicing our druidry, we are giving the gift of community and being part of the work and vision of Anriot Féin. The gift of wealth. Wealth that is hoarded is not wealth at all. This is a common theme across our Indo-European hearth cultures. When we give of our wealth, our tangible resources, we are manifesting the essence of movable wealth. Doat des, I give so that you may give, means that as we give in support of our community, they in turn will be able to give in support of us. When we give of our monetary resources, we are giving the gift of wealth and supporting the work and vision of Anriot Féin. Gift of service. Everyone in ADF is an expert at something. Everyone has a talent or skill that can benefit others. Sharing our special knowledge and our time is something that everyone can do. There are many tasks in the work of Our Own Druidry that just require someone to donate their time or their specific skill set to see a task through. We help set up and tear down ritual space. We organize potlucks and take dishes home to wash. We schedule and attend meetings. We hold an office in a grove or subgroup. We review coursework. When we share our talents and our time, we are giving the gift of service and contributing to the work and vision of Anriot Féin. 5 gifts: prayer, inspiration, community, wealth, and service. These are ways that we can give of ourselves to support the work and vision of Arnuiocht Féin. In sharing these things, we will find that we are given great blessings in return as our community is strengthened, we are valued and supported, and the path of our own druidry is brightened.
Close your eyes. Before you stand the gates between the worlds. You step through and open your eyes again, for you are here beyond the gates. At least you will be if you attend the second annual Beyond the Gates Pan-Pagan Camping Festival hosted by Columbia Grove ADF. Visit beautiful Trout Lake Abbey in Washington this August 24th through 27th for 4 days of fun, companionship, ritual, workshops, and of course conversation. Join workshops led by John Beckett and Courtney Weber, among others, and returning presenters Phaedra Bonowitz and Kirk Thomas. Visit beyondgates.weebly.com to learn more and purchase tickets. I hope I'll be seeing you beyond the gates. And welcome back. Well, that was a pretty information-packed episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. As always, you can find us on Facebook by searching Part the Mist Podcast. We have a discussion group and a fan page. You can email us ptmpod@gmail.com. That's ptmpod@gmail.com. And you can find us online. Our website is ptmpod.libsyn.com, and you can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Podbean. So I hope you've enjoyed our episode this month, and I look forward to talking to you again next month. Take care, folks.